the whole way through the summer on these things, but I always like to spend a long period of time, even through the summer, just focusing in on the Old Testament. To me, it's one of those things that get neglected a lot in modern ministries. Like New Testament is the story of hope, the story of Jesus, and the projection or the way that we continue to do things for churches. But I think that we need to know our origin, our heritage in a sense. And to be honest with you, reading through all the Old Testament stuff, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens. And there's a lot of bad families, like just horrible family. Like you can't imagine, like we look around and we think, wow, that's so bad, that's sad. But then you read in the Old Testament stories and you're thinking, well, that's the same people now, today. Like they're just horrible people. But you know what's amazing about it is God has either transformed them or used them in a way to be able to continue the mission that was put forth for all these different people. It is amazing what God can do, even with people that feel like they can't. Which kind of brings us into our story today. Excuses instead of service. It's Exodus chapter 3 and chapter 4 that we're going to be focusing in. And then what's funny is, why do we feel that we offer excuses for things in church that you would never say, or that was so ridiculous anywhere else? If you were to say some of these excuses, maybe going to a baseball game or a football game or a pro sports game, which you obviously can't quite now, but still, if you were to go and ask these kind of questions, or even like make these excuses, every time I go, they ask for money, so they want money for stuff. The people who I sit around aren't really friendly. The seats are hard and uncomfortable. The coach never comes over to see me or say hi to me, or none of the players are like excited to see me there. I think the referees make bad decisions, so I don't really like that. I'm not going to come if they don't. If I sit around a bunch of hypocrites and non-fans, like they're really just sitting on their phone, or they're not paying attention, or they're looking at other people and what they're wearing, and how dare they look like that? It's black and gold. What other two colors do you need to wear? You don't wear anything else. That's just ridiculous. Some games go way too long. When they go into overtime, I can't stand it. That just drives me nuts. Because I get home late every time. The music they play, I just don't like the music at all. And if the band is playing, that's the worst. They should reschedule those games at a different time. They should reschedule everything so it's more convenient to me. My parents took me when I was little, so I don't really need to go anymore, right? That should be good enough if I was in church and in sporting events, right, when I was little. Does that work? Is that how it works? I don't want to take my kids there because there's nothing for them to do. Does that seem like reasonable excuses for going to a sporting event? Or do people just like, no, we're taking them. It's going. We're go time. Well, you see some of this stuff in Exodus chapter 3. God has told Moses he's heard the cry of Israel and the things that are going on, and he's ready to deliver them. So we're going to see what happens when Moses is asked to go and how he responds. So in verse 10, God says to him in chapter 3 of Exodus, "Come now, therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." So, we are seeing God confront Moses to call him. Many of us maybe have done the same thing, where we say, well, I really can't. We make excuses instead of a reason to serve. Like when you're asked to teach a class, they say, I can't, I don't know how, I want to maybe do the nursery. Hey, I hate kids. I can't do this stuff. No, you don't know me. You don't understand. I'd be throwing them out the window. God puts it in your heart to share with a neighbor. You say, I don't know how to talk to people, right? You make aware of someone's needs in the community, and you totally forget about it, or you think about it, but then you just don't want to do it. Fact is, we asked, very little to do, but we still make excuses like I'm too busy, or I'm already doing things, or can you get somebody else? Sometimes these excuses pile up and get in the way of everything that God is asking you. And actually, there's a story about these army soldiers that were on a pass for a leave. And most of the soldiers hadn't made it back yet for roll call in the morning. So not until about 7 p.m., the first man staggers in and he says, "I'm sorry, sir, but I had a date and I lost track of time and I missed the bus back, and being determined to get home, I hired a cab, and halfway there the cab broke down, and I went to a farmhouse and persuaded the farmer to sell me a horse, and then I got so far riding to camp and the horse fell over dead, and I walked the last 10 miles just to get here." The colonel, a little skeptic, and he's like, "Well, I'll let you off with a little bit of a reprimand instead of whatever it might be." But however, after him, 7 other staggering soldiers come in, telling the same story about having a date, missing the bus, hiring a cab, bought a horse, etc., so on and so. By the 9th man reporting back, the colonel had grown weary of it, and he said, "Okay, now what happened to you?" "Sir, I had this date, and I missed the bus, and I had to hire a cab." And he goes, Wait. Don't tell me the cab broke down." "Oh, no, sir. The cab didn't break down. We just couldn't get around a bunch of these dead horses." Moses had reasons for not following the call of God. Moses begins a series of 5 reasons why he's sufficiently weak in some of these areas. The first excuse he has is, "Don't choose me," me kind of approach. So it's in Exodus chapter 3, verse 11 through 12. Doesn't sound too much like anything, but verse 11, Exodus 3:11. "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?'" And no doubt that Moses was kind of thinking about some of the issues he had before when he tried to help the Israelites before. As we continue on, we see that in Acts chapter 7, verse 23 through 29, it kind of gives a little details of some of those things. Acts chapter 7, verse 23 through 29. Actually, I think it's 28. I'm sorry. "Now he's 40 years old, and he was come to his heart to his brothers of the children of Israel, and to see one of them suffering wrong. He defended and avenged him who was oppressed, and struck down the Egyptian. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would have delivered them by his hand. But they did not understand. And the next day he appeared to 2 of them as he was fighting, and tried to reconcile them, saying, 'Men, you are brother. Why do you wrong one another?' But he did this to his neighbor, pushing him away, saying, 'Who are you, a ruler, a judge over us? Do you want us to kill at me as you did the Egyptian yesterday?'" You see, when Moses tried to deliver them 40 years before, neither of those or anyone would listen or believe anything about him. And he felt, if they didn't believe me 40 years ago, why should it be any different now? The thing is, the past is redeemable. How many of us hold on to thinking of certain people in our lives, saying that they're always going to be that way? They're always going to act like that. They're always going to be this way. Nothing's going to change. We've tried those things. We've done those things. It doesn't work. But see, these things are not set in cement and concrete. These things can change. People can change. We change. Hopefully, we change and we grow. We don't think the same way we do when we were younger, do we? We don't do the same things we did when we were younger. I tell you, I used to jump off of roofs when I was younger. I am not going to try it anymore. The last time I was close to that, I broke 2 ribs. It was not a good experience. So, and not that I wanted to jump, something broke and I had to fall. but it happens. Anyways, story for another time. We don't do the same things. Things do change. God answered Moses in verse 12. So he said, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be the sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. See, Moses' first excuse kind of expressed doubt in himself. He says, well, I can't. Then the second part of that, he actually has an excuse in his doubt in God. So the second excuse is by what authority does God have to be able to do these things? So if we read on in verse 13 through 15, chapter 3, then Moses said to God, indeed, when I came to the children of Israel and said to them, the God of your father sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God didn't ask Moses to go, and he didn't try to explain anything. He asked him to go, and he said he would explain what he needed to know. He would know what he needed to do. And God explained in response right here in verse 14 and 15. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thou shalt say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And I've always liked that phrase because it's repeated. If you know in the New Testament, you remember in the New Testament, the questions that were asked to Jesus are the same response because they are the same. Moreover, God said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. God said, I am who I am. God told Moses it doesn't have to do with who you are, but who I am. Any conflict, any reasoning, anything of that way for a person, we want to know why we're being sent into battle. That's normal. Well, why should I go fight? Why should I do this? Why should I defend this? What's the reason so many people are not committed to God? It's quite frankly, they don't know God. So they don't understand. They don't have that fight. They don't have a reason to know those things. They sort of know God maybe a little bit, but like the Hebrews of Egypt, they lost track of who God is. He's not the Godfather figure sitting in heaven, waiting in angst and turning a deaf ear and not listening or closing his eyes or winking at the sun. He is not only the giver of life, he is life. Amen. When God tells Moses that I am who I am, he is literally saying, I am who was and is and shall always be or continue to be what I have been as always. The third excuse that Moses had was in chapter 4, verses 1 and 9. That Moses answered and said, but suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, the Lord has not appeared to you. Now, if you have the King James Version, it actually says, what if? And that actually is interesting. Well, what if they don't listen? What if, kind of goes through the what if list of all the stuff that, well, what if they don't like me or they look at me and like, whatever. Right. That's kind of where Moses was at. Moses responds, what if they ask me questions I don't have answers to? Have you ever used any of those excuses in your own life? Maybe I'm not an expert on the Bible. I don't know. They might ask me questions I just can't answer. They might confront me, and I'm not ready for that. What ifs are victory killers in the battle for the souls of the world. Excuses will relate us to the second best. It won't ever get us the best. Moses was more focused on the wrong area. And this is a pattern for Moses, isn't it? Sometimes he thinks he's got it, but sometimes he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, to be honest with you, all of us do the same thing. We question everything. We ask, well, why? I don't know what you do. Well, here comes the answer to that. In Exodus chapter 4, continuing on, verses 2 through 5. So the Lord said to him, what do you have in your hand? And he said, a rod. And he said, cast it onto the ground. So he casted it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. And he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, and the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. I want you to take note. God did not ask Moses to do something he doesn't have. God asked him, what is in your hand? What is right here, right now, that you have? God uses what we have for his discretions. He never demands us to do things that we don't have. He will never know the full potential. We will never know the full potential of what we've done unless we are willing to offer it to God. God is not looking for the abilities or availabilities. God is just asking us to do something. You see, many times when God asks, we are tempted to make a list, right? All the stuff that I have, my limitations, my inabilities, and then I got my other side of the list, some of the things I can do. Then we start to look at, well, if I could just focus in on this area, I'm really good at doing this. Let me just do that. God, if you're calling me, I could do this. No, don't ask me to do this because I'm horrible at it. You know what's funny? And we'll get to this. It's actually, I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I'll share that when I get to it. But see, God is not interested in any of those things. God's not interested in your list. He has a list. Your name's on it. You go do what he asks you to do. You don't wait. You don't hesitate. You see, God commanded Moses something simple. Just throw the rod down. Okay, that's simple. So he throws it down. In his obedience, it becomes a serpent. Now God asked him to pick it up. But he didn't ask him just to pick it up. He said, pick it up by the tail. Now, if you've ever picked up a snake before, I have never picked up a snake before. I've hit it with a stick. I've flung them around. I've even done it out here. Grab a stick and just push them out into the cornfield somewhere just to get it away, right? If you grab a snake by the tail, that's not the best way to grab a snake. Because most of the time, the length of the snake is enough to be able to rear back and bite you. So you're not supposed to actually grab it by the tail. You need to get it by the head, the dangerous parts first, and try to keep it safe. Either way, Moses obeyed. Even though it seemed a little bit difficult, a little bit different, Moses obeyed. And it turned back into a staff, into a rod. His faith was the strength to be able to do that. There's a few other signs too. Next, Moses, in verses 6 and 7, his hand was made clean from leprosy, so he gave a spot of leprosy. And in verse 8 and 9, he turned water into blood. I want you to think about that too. Water into blood. Water is life. Blood is a life that we have. The way that we get saved is by that water, blood washing over us. Just a little side point there. God has thus far revealed himself to Moses, told Moses he has a desire to deliver the people. And he gave him signs to kind of prove all these things. Despite all this, okay, Moses still has excuses. God proved himself to him, showed himself to him, did all these things, but Moses still had another excuse. In chapter 4, verses 10 through 12, then Moses said to the Lord, here it comes, "O my Lord, I am not elegant, neither before nor since have you spoken to your servant, but I'm slow to speech and slow to tongue." I can't talk to people, right? I'm not an elegant speaker. I talk funny. I have a slur. I have a southern accent. I can't go up north and talk to people up there. They don't even relate to anything, right? That'd be like if us going down in, middle of nowhere, like Kansas or something, and trying to say, we would have a hard time. It would be difficult. And actually, in Acts chapter 7, verse 22, Moses, in his first 40 years, was a man mighty in words and deeds, but he'd been 40 years out in the wilderness, in the desert. Things kind of changed up a little bit. Continuing on, verse 11 and 12, his response in Exodus 4, 11 and 12. So the Lord said to him, who had made man's mouth, or who had made them mute, the deaf and the seeing, or the blind, have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall say. Our inadequacies are not our problem. And it's not a problem for God. God will make a way for things to work out in his favor. But if we continue to make ourselves unavailable for God's plan, our lives cannot move forward. And still, that wasn't enough. He's got one more excuse. One more excuse. Okay, you could do all this stuff. You could do these things. You could also maybe make me sound a little better when I speak. But, in verse 13, but he said, "O my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send. I don't pick me. Come on. I don't want to go. You can't make me." I mean, this is an 80-year-old man whining like a little baby, isn't he not? Whining like, sometimes we just don't grow up, do we? We just don't grow up. Basically, Moses is stomping his feet and saying, "No, I'm not going. You can't make me. Send somebody else." Well, in Exodus chapter 4, verse 13, the Lord's anger burned against Moses. He was pretty mad at him. He was very mad at him. Let that sink into you. You only got 5 excuses before God gets mad at you. Right? I wouldn't even start with the first one, but if you want to go 5, by that time, he's going to be angry at you, burning at you. It's not a good way to go. Not a good thing to do. When Moses begged, though, God did send someone else and kind of effectively said, I don't trust you in this anger, in this frustration. So standing before a judge, you don't have many excuses, do you? Because all those excuses you have at Judgment Day are going to be all gone. You can't hide it. The naked truth will be there. You can't just make up I had to go wash the car. No, God says, you don't have to go wash the car. You don't have to go to that game. You don't have to stay home and do this. You don't have to cut your grass on, And I'm not saying there's all bad things. I'm just saying sometimes we got to think about our priorities a little bit first. We got to think about our priorities first. Sometimes those things need to be done. You have to take care of it. You have to enjoy life sometimes. Maybe going to a ball game, maybe doing all that stuff. But sometimes those become life. Sometimes those become more important. And sometimes those get in the way and build the wall and divide us from God. Satan will use that wedge in that wall to divide and discourage. Continuing on in verse 14. And he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And look, he's also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he'll be glad in his heart. Now you shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be with your spokesman to the people. So he shall be the spokesman to the people." So God accommodated Moses' lack of faith. And I wouldn't really say compromise. I'm sure that he had that all prepared and all ready and already knew how Moses was going to respond. Even though he was going to be mad. It's like when you ask your kids, "Were you playing in the mud?" And they're covered in mud. No. I wasn't in the mud. You mean, so where did this mud come from? It was in the kitchen. The kitchen mud. And you're like, fully know exactly where the mud came from. You knew exactly what he was doing. You just wanted to make sure that they would tell the truth. And I think at some point in time, God knows exactly what's going on with Aaron and Moses here. Moses was God's man. That was the one he wanted. That's the one he wanted to put first and out there. And he knew that Aaron would be allowed to assist him in some ways. Once the children of Israel were left, Aaron actually is one of the ones that kind of brought some serious problems later on. He led the children into creating the idols at the bottom of Mount Sinai before the receiving of the Ten Commandments. But God's perfect will is a little bit more better than those stupid things that we do as humans on this planet. So, in closing of all this here, with the final breakthrough and the final response in his obedience in Exodus chapter 4, verse 20. So Moses took his wife and his son and put him on a donkey and started back to Egypt. And he took his staff of God in his hand. Ultimately, Moses, and I'm sure if you've ever had to listen or respond to God in any way, we've done the same thing. We have battled and pushed and battled and pushed and say, no, I can't. No, I can't. I don't know how to do this. You can't make me. And ultimately, in our obedience, lives have been changed. I hope. Over 2 million Israelites who were slaves, 2 million slaves at the time under Moses had walked out of the land of slavery because of obedience. Because he listened to God. He might have pushed back a lot, 5 times trying to come up with reasons why not to do it. But ultimately, he did what God had asked him. Final thought here. Dr. B.J. Miller once said, it's a great deal easier to do what to which God has given us to do, no matter how hard it is, than to face the responsibilities of not doing it at all. The cost of obedience is nothing. Sometimes it's our pride, our arrogance, our thoughts that gives us disobedience, but that's so little in comparison to how easy it would be to just listen and obey. Sometimes we are the people that say, well, we can't, but in reality we say, I won't. And as Christians, we need to be very careful in how we choose and what we choose. Often we choose to say we can't, but in reality is we're saying, I won't. That's your excuse. Oh, I can't do that. I can't do it. But in reality, you're actually telling God, I won't ever do it. I won't ever do it. I'll tell you the fact, you don't really want to fight back to God. You don't want to throw a fist with God. Just the fact is that we need to make a choice. We either choose to disobey or to obey. God has a plan. He never expects you to carry out that plan by yourself. God will see you through it and carry you through it. He simply wants you to make one thing and be the instrument in His plan. And all you have to stake is nothing. All you have to do is obey. Let us pray. Lord Jesus, thank you again for the opportunity to listen and as we continue to hear your words. And be as Moses has, we know that many times we push back, we fight back, we don't understand, and we don't know why. And we know in the end, ultimately, if we listen and we obey and move forward, our lives and the lives around us will continue to change. Because of your glory, not because of our own, but because of you and only you. And in your precious name, amen. Go in peace.